A nurse saw the killer's hand move toward the oxygen valve during surgery. She could have let the Mafia boss die on the table. Instead, she saved him. Not out of mercy, but because 3 years ago, the same method was used to murder her brother. And now, the man she just rescued was her only chance at justice. The bullet hit Rafael Moretti in the chest before he heard the gunshot. His knees buckled on the rain-slicked pavement outside Club Velvet, and his mind registered 3 distinct thoughts in rapid succession. Ambush, professional, and Caruso. The second bullet punched through his shoulder, spinning him sideways into the brick wall. The third missed, he was already falling. Boss! Boss! Marco's voice seemed to come from underwater. Rafael's vision blurred. The neon signs of downtown Chicago bleeding into abstract smears of red and blue. Strong hands grabbed him, dragged him toward the armored SUV idling at the curb. More gunfire erupted, his men returning fire at shadows that had already melted into the November darkness. Rafael tried to speak, to give orders, but blood filled his mouth. The metallic taste triggered a primal fear he hadn't felt in 30 years. The fear of dying badly, of leaving loose ends, of giving Dante Caruso exactly what he wanted. The SUV's tires screamed against wet asphalt. Marco pressed both hands against Rafael's chest, trying to slow the arterial spray painting the leather seats crimson. Stay with me, boss. We're 2 minutes out. 2 minutes. But Rafael could feel his consciousness slipping like water through cupped hands. The pain was already fading, replaced by a creeping cold that started in his fingers and crawled toward his heart. He'd seen enough men die to recognize the signs. This is it, he thought with strange clarity. After everything, after 30 years of war, betrayal, survival, I'm going out on a Chicago street like some two-bit hustler. Then everything went black. When awareness returned, it came in fragments. Fluorescent lights too bright, antiseptic smell burning his nostrils, voices shouting medical terminology he didn't understand. Rafael tried to move, but his body refused to obey. Hands held him down, not violently but firmly. Mr. Moretti, can you hear me? You're at St. Helena Hospital. You've been shot. We're prepping you for emergency surgery. A woman's face appeared above him, young and focused. A nurse. She was checking tubes, adjusting machines, her movements precise and practiced. For a moment their eyes met. What struck Rafael, even through the haze of pain and shock, was that she wasn't afraid. Everyone was afraid of him. It was the baseline reaction he'd lived with for decades. Fear opened doors, loosened tongues, kept order in a world of chaos. But this nurse looked at him like he was just another trauma case. Another body on the table. Another life to save or lose based on skill and luck. Am I going to make it? Rafael managed to rasp. The nurse, her badge read J-chan, adjusted in 4-line without looking at him. That depends on the next few hours. But the surgeon is excellent and you got here fast. Those are good signs. Professional. Detached. Honest. Rafael would have laughed if he had the breath. Here he was, Chicago's most feared crime boss, and this slip of a woman was giving him odds like a blackjack dealer. Mr. Moretti, I need you to count backward from 10, another voice said. The anesthesiologist, masked and ready. Can you do that? Rafael wanted to refuse, wanted to stay conscious and aware, but the drugs were already pulling him under. He counted. 10, 9, 8-inch. The last thing he saw before the world dissolved was Nurse Chen's face, impassive and professional, as she made a notation on his chart. Something about her bothered him, something he couldn't quite identify. Then the darkness took him again, complete and absolute. Juliet Chen stepped back from the operating table as the surgeon made the first incision. Around her, the OR team moved in practiced synchronization. A ballet of controlled violence where they cut into flesh to save it. She'd been doing this for 8 years and the routine had become second nature. Anticipate needs, monitor vitals, adjust equipment, stay 3 steps ahead of complications. But tonight was different. Tonight, the man on the table was Rafael Moretti. She'd recognized him immediately when the gurney crashed through the ER doors, despite the blood and the chaos. Everyone in Chicago knew that face. It had been on the news often enough. Federal investigations, suspected murders, organized crime. The man was a walking morgue, responsible for more deaths than she could count. And in about 90 seconds, someone in this room was going to try to add one more to his tally. Juliet glanced at the surgical tech across the table, Vincent Torres, a 32-year-old former Army medic who'd worked at St. Helena for 6 months. She'd worked with him a dozen times, and he'd always been competent, professional, unremarkable. But 3 hours ago, while prepping the ore, she'd seen him in the supply room talking on his phone, his voice low and urgent. She'd caught only fragments. Tonight, during surgery, it'll look natural. At the time, she'd thought nothing of it. Medical staff took personal calls. Life didn't stop just because you were at work. Then Rafael Moretti arrived with 3 bullets in him, and Vincent's face had gone white as chalk. Now, as the surgery progressed, Juliet watched him, watched his hands, watched his eyes, watched for the moment when professionalism would give way to something else. The surgeon worked efficiently, extracting bullets, repairing damage, calling for instruments and supplies. Blood pressure stable. Heart rate elevated but manageable. Oxygen saturation at 98%. Then Vincent moved toward the oxygen console, his movements casual, routine. Juliet's stomach tightened. She saw his hand on the regulator valve, saw it turn just slightly, just enough. The kind of adjustment that happened 100 times during surgery, so normal that nobody would think twice about it. Except the valve was turning the wrong direction, closing instead of opening. Juliet looked at the monitors. Oxygen saturation still at 98%. But that would change in about 45 seconds, would drop to 95, then 90, then 85. The surgeon would notice around 80, would call for increased oxygen. Vincent would pretend to adjust it, would make concerned noises, would suggest the regulator was malfunctioning. By the time they figured out the problem and got a replacement, Rafael Moretti's brain would be hypoxic. Even if they revived him, he'd never be the same. And the official cause of death, when it came a few hours or days later, would be surgical complications. Brain damage from oxygen deprivation during a traumatic operation. Clean. Deniable. Professional. Juliet had seen it once before. 3 years ago. Different hospital, different patient, same technique. Her brother David, gasping for air that wouldn't come, his brain dying cell by cell while doctors scrambled to figure out what was wrong with the equipment. The memory burned through her like acid. Oxygen saturation, 96%. Juliet moved to the console, her movements smooth and unhurried. "I've got this, Vincent," she said, her voice professionally neutral. "Dr. Reeves wants you to prep the next suture tray." Vincent hesitated, his eyes meeting hers for just a moment. She saw the calculation there, the fear, the realization that he'd been noticed. "I can handle both," he started. "Now, please." Juliet's tone didn't change, but there was steel underneath. "We're at a critical juncture." The surgeon glanced up briefly. "Vincent, do what the nurse says. I need those sutures ready." Vincent stepped back, his jaw tight. Juliet took his place at the oxygen console and immediately opened the valve to full flow. The regulator hummed, oxygen flooding the system. Oxygen saturation, 95%. Then 97. Then back to 98. Crisis averted. Patient stable. Nobody else in the room noticed. To them, it was just a minor adjustment, a routine correction during a complex surgery. The surgeon continued working, repairing the damage from 3 bullets that should have killed Rafael Moretti in the street. But Juliet knew, and Vincent knew that she knew. Their eyes met across the table, and in that moment, an understanding passed between them. He'd failed. She'd stopped him. And now they both had to pretend nothing had happened, had to finish this surgery and smile and act normal while a murder attempt dissolved into just another night at St. Helena Hospital. Vincent's hand trembled slightly as he prepared the suture tray. Juliet kept her face blank, professional, unremarkable. Inside, her mind was racing, calculating, planning. Because she just saved Raphael Moretti's life. Not out of duty, not out of compassion, but because 3 years ago, someone had used this exact method to murder her brother David during what should have been routine surgery. The police investigation had gone nowhere. The hospital review found no wrongdoing. The death was ruled accidental, tragic, unpreventable. But Juliet knew better. She'd always known. She just hadn't been able to prove it. Until tonight. Tonight she'd watched the method in action. Seen it with her own eyes. Witnessed the deliberate, precise manipulation that looked like equipment failure but was actually murder. And she knew exactly who had ordered it. Dante Caruso. The man who'd forced her brother into his organization. The man who'd had David killed when he tried to leave. The man who used this signature technique because it was clean, professional, and left no evidence. The same man who just tried to kill his rival Raphael Moretti using the exact same method. The surgery continued for another 90 minutes. Juliet worked in focused silence, her hands steady, her face revealing nothing. When the final sutures were placed and Raphael Moretti was wheeled to recovery, alive, stable, expected to survive, the OR team dispersed with tired efficiency. Vincent left quickly, avoiding eye contact. Juliet stripped off her gloves and mask, washed her hands in the scrub sink, and allowed herself one moment of stillness. In the polished steel of the soap dispenser, she saw her own reflection. Exhausted, drawn but determined. She just saved a monster to catch a bigger monster. And now the real work was about to begin. Because Raphael Moretti didn't know it yet, but he owed her his life. And Julietchen was about to collect that debt in a very specific way. Dante Caruso had killed her brother and walked away clean. That was about to change. End of section 1. Word count. 986. Raphael woke to the sound of angry whispers and the smell of disinfectant. His chest felt like someone had parked a truck on it, and every breath came with a price. But he was alive, which meant someone had screwed up. Can't stay here, boss. This place is compromised. He just got out of surgery, you idiot. Moving him could kill him. And staying here definitely will. They already tried once. Enough. Raphael's voice came out as barely more than a rasp, but it cut through the argument like a knife. His men went silent immediately. Marco appeared at his bedside, relief flooding his weathered face. Boss. Thank God. How you feeling? Like I got shot 3 times. Raphael tried to sit up and immediately regretted it. Pain exploded across his chest. How long was I out? Surgery took 2 hours. You've been in recovery for 3 more. It's almost 6 in the morning. Marco glanced at the door, then lowered his voice. Boss, we got a problem. That wasn't random. The shooters knew exactly where you'd be, exactly when. And they disappeared like smoke. Raphael had already figured that part out. Caruso. Has to be. But it gets worse. Marco leaned closer. While you were in surgery, something happened. I've been questioning the staff, being discreet about it, and there's talk. One of the surgical techs, guy named Vincent Torres, left his shift early. Walked out right after your operation, didn't clock out, didn't say goodbye to anyone. Just vanished. Raphael's jaw tightened. An ambush followed by something wrong in the OR. This wasn't just an attempt on his life. This was Caruso trying to finish the job with a backup plan. What else? Torres had only been here 6 months. Before that, he worked at 3 other hospitals, never stayed long at any of them. Always left right after someone important died during surgery. Marco pulled out his phone, showing Raphael a photo of Vincent. I'm running his background now, but I'm betting we find Caruso's money somewhere in his accounts. Lock down this floor, Raphael ordered, his voice gaining strength despite the pain. I want armed men at every entrance. Nobody comes in or out without being vetted. Doctors, nurses, janitors, I don't care who they are. We clear them first. Already done, boss. We've got 12 guys on this wing. Hospital administration is pissed, but they're not stupid enough to argue with us. Raphael nodded, then winced at the movement. The shooter. Any leads? Working on it. But boss, there's something else you should know. Marco hesitated. The surgery almost went wrong. Your oxygen levels dropped during the operation. The surgeon said it was close, real close. Equipment malfunction, they're saying. Equipment malfunction. Right after Vincent Torres's suspicious presence in the OR. Raphael didn't believe in coincidences. Who fixed it? What? Who fixed the oxygen problem? Raphael kept his eyes on Marco's face. Someone must have noticed, must have corrected it. Who? Marco checked his notes. One of the nurses. Juliette Chen. She's the one who caught it, adjusted the equipment. Surgeon said she probably saved your life. Juliette Chen. Raphael remembered her face from before surgery. Calm, professional, completely unafraid. He'd noted it at the time, filed it away as unusual. Now it seemed significant. I want to see her. Boss, we've already questioned all the staff. They're clean. Just doing their jobs. I don't care if she's clean or not. Raphael fixed Marco with a hard stare. A nurse just happened to catch a problem that nobody else noticed, at exactly the right moment, during an operation where someone was trying to kill me. That's not luck. That's knowledge. She knew what to look for. Marco frowned. You think she's involved? I think she knew someone was trying to kill me in that operating room, and she stopped it. Raphael shifted in the bed, ignoring the pain. Question is why? Nobody helps me out of the goodness of their heart. Everyone wants something. I need to know what she wants. I'll bring her in for questioning. No, not questioning. I want to talk to her. Privately. Just her and me. Raphael closed his eyes briefly, fatigue pulling at him. And Marco? Find Vincent Torres. I don't care if you have to turn over every rock in Chicago. Find him and find out who paid him. On it, boss. Marco left, barking orders to the men stationed outside. Within minutes, Raphael could hear the increased activity. Footsteps in the hallway, low voices, the distinctive sound of weapons being checked. His floor was becoming a fortress. Good. Let them come. Let Caruso send his best. Raphael Moretti hadn't survived 30 years in this business by being careless. But the nurse bothered him. Juliette Chen. Something about her reaction, her timing, the way she'd looked at him before surgery. No fear, but something else. Something calculating. Raphael had built his empire on reading people, on understanding motivations and leverage points. Every person could be bought, threatened, or manipulated. You just had to find the right pressure point. So what was Juliette Chen's pressure point? He closed his eyes, letting his mind work through the puzzle. A nurse who recognized a murder attempt in progress. Who had the skill to stop it. Who saved his life but showed no loyalty, no fear, no obvious agenda. That kind of person was either very dangerous or very useful. Maybe both. 2 floors down in the nurse's locker room, Juliette changed out of her scrubs with mechanical precision. Her shift was over, but she knew she couldn't leave yet. Raphael Moretti's men were everywhere, watching, questioning, making everyone nervous. She'd known they would investigate. Had prepared for it. Her record was clean: 8 years of excellent performance reviews, no disciplinary actions, no suspicious behavior. She was exactly what she appeared to be. A dedicated trauma nurse who'd saved countless lives. The fact that one of those lives belonged to Chicago's most notorious crime boss was just part of the job. That's what she told the 2 men who'd questioned her an hour ago. Professional. Detached. Slightly annoyed at the disruption to her routine. They'd believed her. Or at least, they'd had no reason not to. But Juliette knew the real test was coming. Raphael Moretti wasn't stupid. He hadn't survived 3 decades of gang wars by taking things at face value. He would want to understand why she'd been in exactly the right place at exactly the right moment to save his life. She needed to be ready with answers that were true enough to be believed but incomplete enough to hide her real agenda. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Mr. Moretti requests to see you. Room 407. Come alone. Juliet stared at the message. This was it. The moment when her plan either moved forward or fell apart completely. She took a breath, steadying herself, then headed for the elevator. Time to collect on the debt Rafael Moretti didn't know he owed. End of section 2. Word count. 903 running total. 1,889 word sections remaining 10. Room 407 was quieter than Juliet expected. No guards inside, though she'd counted 4 in the hallway. Rafael Moretti sat propped up in bed, his chest wrapped in bandages, and 4 line running into his arm. He looked pale but alert, his dark eyes tracking her from the moment she entered. "Close the door," he said. Juliet did, then remained standing near it. Professional distance. Body language that said she was here because summoned, not because she wanted to be. Rafael studied her in silence for a long moment. Juliet had been stared at by plenty of difficult patients, angry family members, and aggressive drunks in the ER. She kept her expression neutral, waiting. "You saved my life," Rafael finally said. "I did my job." "You did more than that," he shifted slightly, wincing. "The oxygen problem during surgery. You fixed it at exactly the right moment. Not a second too late, not a second too early. Perfect timing." Juliet said nothing. "Here's what I think happened," Rafael continued, his voice measured. "Someone tried to kill me in that operating room. Made it look like equipment failure. But you caught it because you knew what to look for." He paused. "Which means you've seen it before. Smart." Juliet had known he would be, but experiencing it firsthand was different. She made a decision, calculated risk but necessary. "Yes," she said simply. Raphael's eyes narrowed. "Who?" "My brother." Juliet walked to the chair beside his bed and sat down. Her posture relaxed but her hands folded carefully in her lap. "David Chun. 3 years ago. He died during what should have been routine surgery at Mercy General. The official cause was complications from anesthesia. But I knew better." "How?" "Because I'm a trauma nurse with 8 years of experience. I know what anesthesia complications look like. I reviewed his records, his vitals, the timeline. Someone reduced his oxygen supply during the procedure. Slowly, precisely. By the time anyone noticed, his brain was already dying." She kept her voice clinical, factual. "The method is almost impossible to detect unless you know exactly what you're looking for." Rafael absorbed this information. "And you knew what to look for during my surgery. I saw the surgical tech, Vincent Torres, adjust the oxygen regulator, except he turned it the wrong direction. Closing the valve instead of opening it." Juliet met his gaze directly. "It's the same technique someone used to kill David. Deliberate oxygen deprivation disguised as equipment malfunction. Clean, professional, leaves no evidence." "Who killed your brother?" "The man who just tried to kill you." Juliet's voice remained steady, but Raphael heard the steel underneath. "Dante Caruso." The name hung in the air between them. Raphael's jaw tightened, but he showed no other reaction. "Your brother worked for Caruso." Unwillingly, Juliet had rehearsed this part, knew she had to get it right. David was an accountant. Good with numbers, terrible at saying no. Caruso's people approached him, asked him to consult on some business structures. David thought he could help them legitimize, go legal. By the time he realized he was laundering blood money, it was too late. So he tried to run. He tried to do the right thing. Went to the FBI, offered to testify, turn over records. Juliet's hands tightened slightly in her lap. 2 weeks later, he needed emergency surgery for appendicitis. Simple procedure. He never woke up. The hospital investigation found no wrongdoing. Case closed. Raphael nodded slowly. "But you knew." "I knew. I just couldn't prove it." She leaned forward slightly. "Until tonight. When I saw Vincent Torres use the exact same method on you, I finally had confirmation. This is Caruso's signature kill. Surgical murder. It's how he eliminates problems without leaving evidence. Why tell me this? Raphael asked. Why not let me die? I'm not exactly a good person, Nurse-chan. The world might be better off without me. Because if you die, Caruso wins. Juliet's voice was flat, matter-of-fact. He consolidates power, absorbs your operations, becomes untouchable. My brother's death stays buried in medical records. Vincent Torres vanishes like all the others who've done this job for him. And Caruso keeps killing people in operating rooms whenever it's convenient. So you saved me out of strategy, not compassion. I saved you because you're the only person in Chicago with the resources and motivation to take Caruso down. Juliet stood, her movements calm and controlled. I don't care about your criminal empire, Mr. Moretti. I don't care about territory or money or power. I care about justice for my brother. And you're my best chance of getting it. Raphael stared at her for a long moment. In 30 years of dealing with criminals, informants, and civilians caught in the crossfire, he'd learned to read desperation, fear, and lies. This woman showed none of those things. What she showed was cold, calculated determination. She'd saved his life not because she was noble, but because she needed him alive for her own purposes. He respected that. Caruso's organization is bigger than mine right now, Raphael said carefully. Protected by dirty cops, judges, federal agents. Taking him down isn't simple. Nothing worth doing is simple. It could take months, maybe years. And it's dangerous. He already killed your brother for trying to expose him. If he finds out you're coming after him. He won't find out, Juliet interrupted. Because I'm not the one coming after him. You are. I'm just a nurse who saved a patient's life. Nobody's suspicious about that. Raphael almost smiled. Almost. You've thought this through. For 3 years, Juliet walked to the door, then paused with her hand on the handle. You asked why I'm telling you this. Here's the real answer. Because you owe me your life and I'm calling in that debt. Help me get justice for David. Help me take down Dante Caruso. Do that and we're even. And if I refuse, Juliet turned back to face him. Then you'll spend the rest of your life, however long that is, knowing that Caruso tried to kill you with a method he's used successfully for years. Knowing that he owns surgeons and nurses in hospitals across the city. Knowing that anytime you need medical care, you're rolling the dice on whether someone in that operating room is on his payroll. She paused to let that sink in. Or, she continued, you can work with me. Use the information I have about how David died, combine it with your resources and knowledge of Caruso's organization, and take him apart piece by piece. Raphael considered her proposal. Logic said to refuse, to handle Caruso his own way, with his own methods. But logic also said that this woman had information he needed. Proof of Caruso's murder technique. Evidence that could expose vulnerabilities in his rival's operation. And more than that, she had something rare in his world. A motive that had nothing to do with money or power. Personal vengeance was pure, focused, reliable. Sit down, Raphael said. Let's talk specifics. Juliet returned to the chair. Her expression neutral but her eyes sharp. First question, Raphael continued. This method Caruso uses, the oxygen murder during surgery. How many times has he done it? That I can prove. 3 including David in your attempt. But I suspect more. Juliet pulled out her phone. I've been tracking suspicious surgical deaths at Chicago hospitals for 3 years. Cases where healthy people died during routine procedures from complications. I found 11 possibles. Raphael's mind was already working. 11 murders. 11 families who deserved answers. 11 pieces of evidence that could destroy Caruso. We're going to need more than suspicion, he said. We need proof. Records, witnesses, money trails. I know. Juliet met his gaze evenly. That's why I saved your life. Because taking down Caruso requires resources I don't have and power I'll never have. But you do. So we have an alliance. No, Juliet corrected. We have a transaction. I give you information. You give me justice. When Caruso falls, we're done. No obligations, no loyalty, no future relationship. Raphael nodded slowly. Fair enough. But I have conditions too. I'm listening. This stays between us. Nobody else knows. Not your friends, not your colleagues, not anyone. Caruso has informants everywhere. Agreed. And we do this smart. No rushing in, no emotional decisions. We build the case carefully, find every weak point, and when we move, we take down his entire organization at once. Agreed. They sat in silence for a moment. Two people from completely different worlds, united by a shared enemy and mutual need. One more thing, Raphael said. Why do you trust me? I'm a criminal. I've hurt people. For all you know, I'm just as bad as Caruso. Juliet stood, preparing to leave. I don't trust you, Mr. Moretti, but I know you hate Caruso as much as I do. And right now, shared hatred is more reliable than trust. She walked to the door. I'll be in touch when I have more information. In the meantime, get better. We have work to do. Then she was gone, leaving Raphael alone with his thoughts and the beginning of a plan. End of section 3. Word count. 900 running total. 2,789 word sections remaining. 9. 48 hours after their conversation, Juliet stood at the nurse's station reviewing Raphael's chart. To anyone watching, she was just doing her job, monitoring a high-profile patient's recovery. But her mind was working through the logistics of something much more complicated. Raphael was healing faster than expected. The bullets had missed anything vital, and his body was responding well to treatment. In a normal situation, he'd be discharged in another week. But this wasn't a normal situation. Caruso's people would be watching the hospital, waiting for their chance. Vincent Torres had failed, but there would be others. And Raphael's men, despite their armed presence, couldn't protect him indefinitely. Hospital administration was already pushing back, threatening to call the police if the security situation didn't resolve soon. They needed to move Raphael somewhere safer, somewhere Caruso wouldn't think to look. The problem was how to do it without tipping off Caruso's informants that Raphael was recovering. If word got out that he was strong enough to transfer, Caruso would know the oxygen attempt had failed. He'd change tactics, send shooters instead of surgical techs. Juliet looked up to find Dr. Patricia Reeves approaching, coffee in hand and exhaustion on her face. The surgeon had been monitoring Raphael personally, aware that any complications with such a high-profile patient could destroy her career. How's our mop boss doing? Patricia asked quietly. Vitals are good. Pain management is working. He's ahead of schedule for recovery. Juliet hesitated, then made her move. Actually, I wanted to talk to you about something. Patricia raised an eyebrow. What's wrong? Maybe nothing. But I've been noticing some irregularities in his cardiac enzymes. Juliet pulled up the chart on the computer, showing Patricia the numbers she'd carefully documented over the past 2 days. See here? Small elevations. Nothing critical yet, but given the trauma he sustained and his age, I'm concerned about potential cardiac stress. Patricia frowned, studying the data. The numbers were technically within normal range, barely, but they did show a pattern that could indicate problems brewing. His EKG is clean, Patricia noted. So far. But we both know cardiac issues can develop suddenly post-trauma. If he has an event here, with all the stress and security problems, Juliet let the implication hang. Maybe we should consider transfer to a facility with better cardiac monitoring. Somewhere with a specialized cardiac ICU. You're thinking St. Catherine's. They have excellent cardiac care. And it's more private, more secure. Better for everyone. Juliet kept her voice professional, clinical. Mr. Moretti's associates are making the staff nervous. A smaller, private facility might handle the situation better. Patricia considered this. St. Catherine's was a boutique hospital on the north side, catering to wealthy patients who wanted privacy and luxury care. It had a solid reputation and, more importantly from the hospital's perspective, moving Raphael there would solve their security headache. "Let me review his labs again," Patricia said. "If there's genuine concern about cardiac complications, transfer makes sense. But I'm not moving him just to make administration happy." "Of course not. Patient safety first." Juliet pulled up more data, showing Patricia the trend line she'd carefully constructed. Everything was technically accurate. Raphael's body was under stress. His heart was working harder than normal. There were minor elevations in his cardiac markers. None of it was immediately dangerous, but it painted a picture of potential risk. Patricia studied the numbers for several minutes, her medical training warring with her instinct that something about this felt orchestrated. But the data was there, documented properly, following all protocols. "All right," she finally said. "I'll recommend transfer to St. Catherine's Cardiac Unit for observation and advanced monitoring. But Juliet, if this is about getting him out of our hospital for political reasons rather than medical ones, I need to know." Juliet met her eyes steadily. "This is about patient care. If Mr. Moretti develops cardiac complications here, with everything else going on, we might not catch it in time. St. Catherine's is better equipped for this specific situation." It wasn't exactly a lie. Raphael was safer anywhere other than St. Helena, where Caruso clearly had access and influence. Patricia nodded slowly. "I'll make the arrangements. Probably take a day or two to coordinate with St. Catherine's and get insurance approval." "Thank you, doctor." That evening, Juliet made her way to Raphael's room during her break. Marco stood guard outside but had learned to recognize her by now. He nodded and stepped aside. Raphael was sitting up in bed, reviewing something on a tablet. He looked up when she entered and immediately dismissed the other guard in the room with a slight gesture. "We're moving you," Juliet said without preamble. "St. Catherine's Hospital, Cardiac Observation Unit." Raphael's eyes sharpened. "I don't have cardiac problems." "You do according to your medical records." Juliet pulled out her phone, showing him the chart data. "Small elevations in cardiac enzymes, evidence of post-trauma stress on your heart. Nothing immediately dangerous, but enough to justify transfer to a specialized facility." "You faked the numbers." "I documented real findings and emphasized certain patterns." Juliet's tone was matter-of-fact. "Your body is under stress. The numbers aren't fabricated. They're just strategically interpreted." Raphael almost smiled. "Clever." "More importantly, St. Catherine's is run by Dr. Anthony Russo. I believe you know him." Now Raphael did smile, thin and predatory. "Tony Russo. We grew up together in Little Italy. He patched up my men for 20 years before going legitimate. So you'll be safe there. His facility, his staff, his control." Juliet sat down. "And here's the crucial part. Caruso's informants will report that you're being transferred due to cardiac complications. He'll think the oxygen deprivation during surgery did cause damage, that you're weaker than you appear." Raphael caught on immediately. "He'll think he's winning. That even though I survived, I'm compromised." "Exactly. He'll relax, maybe get careless. Meanwhile, you recover in safety and we plan our next move." "When does this happen?" "Dr. Reeves is arranging it now. Probably day after tomorrow. Insurance approval, facility coordination. It has to look legitimate." Juliet stood. "Once you're at St. Catherine's, you'll have time to gather your people, plan strategy. I'll continue working here, gathering information about the other suspicious deaths, building the case against Caruso." Raphael studied her carefully. "You're good at this. The deception, the planning. Ever consider a career change?" "I'm a nurse, Mr. Moretti. I save lives. I don't take them." "Sometimes saving one life requires taking another." Juliet's expression hardened. "I'll get you the information you need to take down Caruso. What you do with it is your choice. But I won't have blood on my hands beyond what's necessary for justice." "Fair enough." Raphael shifted in bed, wincing slightly. "What about Vincent Torres?" Any word. Marco's people are still searching. He disappeared completely, probably left Chicago entirely. But I've been asking around discreetly. Torres worked at 5 different hospitals over the past 3 years. Every single one had a suspicious surgical death within his employment period. She paused. I think he's Caruso's specialist. The man he calls when he needs someone eliminated cleanly. Then Torres can identify Caruso directly. If we find him, he'll either run further or Caruso will have him killed to protect himself. Juliet shook her head. Torres is a loose end. Caruso won't let him stay loose for long. Raphael nodded grimly. Then we need to move faster than Caruso expects. Get me to St. Catherine's. Let him think he's won. And then we start taking apart his organization piece by piece. Agreed. Juliet moved toward the door. I'll coordinate with Dr. Russo directly. Make sure he understands the real situation. Juliet. Raphael's voice stopped her. Thank you. For this. For all of it. She turned back, her expression unreadable. Don't thank me yet, Mr. Moretti. We haven't won anything. Caruso is still out there, still powerful, still killing people. Until he's stopped, there's nothing to be grateful for. Even so, you could have let me die. Or turned this information over to the FBI. Instead, you're risking yourself to help me take him down. I'm not helping you. I'm using you. Juliet's voice was cold. The FBI couldn't touch Caruso 3 years ago. They couldn't protect David. I'm not making that mistake again. Sometimes justice requires getting your hands dirty. I'm just making sure someone else's hands get dirty instead of mine. With that, she left, leaving Raphael alone with his thoughts. He understood her completely. She was like him in a way, someone who'd learned that the system didn't always work, that sometimes you had to operate outside the rules to get real justice. The difference was she still believed there was a line between justice and vengeance. Raphael had crossed that line so many times he couldn't see it anymore. But for now their goals aligned. And that was enough. End of section 4. Word count. 899 running total. 3,688 words. Sections remaining. 8. The transfer happened at dawn, deliberately timed when Caruso's watchers would be tired and less alert. An ambulance pulled up to St. Helena's service entrance, and Raphael was wheeled out on a gurney, monitors beeping, oxygen mask on his face. To anyone observing, he looked like a man barely clinging to life. Marco rode in the ambulance, hand resting near his concealed weapon. They took a circuitous route through Chicago's early morning streets, checking for tails, doubling back twice. Only when Marco was satisfied they were clean did they head to St. Catherine's. Dr. Anthony Russo met them personally at the private entrance, his silver hair and expensive suit making him look more like a businessman than a doctor. But his eyes were sharp as he assessed Raphael's condition. Jesus, Raph. You look like hell. I've been better. Raphael pulled off the oxygen mask as soon as they were inside. Thanks for this, Tony. Don't thank me yet. If Caruso figures out you're here. Tony led them through quiet corridors to a private wing on the 4th floor. I've cleared this entire section. My most trusted staff only. No one gets in without my personal authorization. The suite was more hotel room than hospital. Hardwood floors, real furniture, windows overlooking Lake Michigan. Medical equipment was discreetly incorporated. State-of-the-art but not obtrusive. Nurse Chan called me yesterday, Tony said as he helped Raphael into the bed. Explain the situation. Or at least part of it. You want to tell me the rest? Raphael gave him the abbreviated version: the ambush, the surgical sabotage, Caruso's involvement, the alliance with Juliet. Tony listened without interrupting, his expression growing darker. This oxygen murder technique, Tony finally said. I've heard rumors. Doctors talk. Cases that don't add up. But no one wants to believe another medical professional would deliberately kill patients. Believe it, Raphael said. And we need to prove it. Tony nodded slowly. I'll help however I can. But Raph, be careful. Caruso's got reach you might not expect. Judges, cops, hospital administrators. If he finds out you're planning something, he won't. Not until it's too late. 3 days later, Juliet arrived at St. Catherine's after her shift at St. Helena. She'd been careful about her visits, irregular timing, always in civilian clothes, nothing to suggest a pattern. To anyone watching, she was just a nurse checking on a transferred patient as a professional courtesy. Raphael was in the suite sitting area. Laptop open, papers spread across the coffee table. He looked stronger, the color returning to his face. Marco stood by the window, ever vigilant. "You look better," Juliet said. "Clean air, no stress." Tony's cooking. Raphael gestured to the papers. "I've been digging into Caruso's organization. Every business, every property, every known associate. But I need what you have. Your brother's files." Juliet had been expecting this. "I'll bring them tomorrow. But we review them together. I'm not handing over everything David collected, just so you can wage a mob war." "Fair enough." Raphael closed the laptop. "What have you learned about the other deaths? The 11 suspicious cases?" Juliet pulled out her tablet, displaying a spreadsheet. "I've narrowed it down to 8 that fit the pattern. All happened during surgery. All were healthy people who went in for routine procedures and never woke up. All had Vincent Torres on the surgical team at some point." She pulled up each case file, showing Raphael the details. A banker who'd been laundering money for Caruso and wanted out. A city councilman who'd started asking uncomfortable questions about development contracts. A journalist investigating organized crime connections to the mayor's office. Every single victim was a problem for Caruso, Marco observed from the window. And every single death looked natural. "That's his pattern," Juliet confirmed. "Why risk a public hit when you can arrange a medical accident? No witnesses, no evidence, no investigation." Raphael studied the files, his mind cataloging connections and possibilities. "Your brother's documentation. Does it connect Caruso to any of these people?" 3 of them. David kept detailed records of money transfers, shell companies, offshore accounts. Some of these victims appear in his ledgers. Juliet swiped through more files. "But here's the problem. Financial records alone aren't enough. We need to connect Caruso directly to the murders. Prove he ordered them, paid for them, orchestrated them. Vincent Torres could do that. If we could find him. But Marco's people have been searching for 3 days with no results. Torres has disappeared completely." Raphael leaned back thinking. Caruso will eliminate him eventually. Torres is a liability, the only person who can directly connect him to multiple murders. Once Caruso's sure I'm not a threat anymore, he'll clean up loose ends. "So we need to find Torres before Caruso does," Juliet said. "Or we make Caruso lead us to him." Raphael's eyes gleamed. "If Torres thinks he's in danger, he'll reach out to Caruso for protection or payment. And when he does, we'll be watching." Marco turned from the window. "Boss, we don't have the resources for that level of surveillance. Half our crew is scattered. The other half is trying to hold territory against Caruso's expansion. Then we get creative." Raphael looked at Juliet. "Tomorrow bring your brother's files. All of them. We map Caruso's entire operation, money, muscle, connections, weaknesses. Then we figure out where Torres fits and how to use him against Caruso." The next evening, Juliet returned with a banker's box full of documents. She'd kept everything in a storage unit across town. Too afraid to destroy it, but too scared to do anything with it. Until now. She spread the contents across Raphael's suite, ledgers, flash drives, handwritten notes, bank statements, photographs. David's life work. His attempt to document the crimes he'd been forced to participate in. Raphael and Marco went through everything systematically. Raphael's trained eye picking out patterns and connections that would mean nothing to normal people, but told entire stories in the criminal underworld. "Your brother was meticulous," Raphael said with genuine respect. "These shell companies here, I recognize some of them. Caruso uses them to move drug money. And these transfers to overseas accounts, that's how he pays off politicians and cops. David thought documentation would protect him, Juliet said quietly. That if he recorded everything, testified to everything, Caruso wouldn't dare touch him. He underestimated how much Caruso values silence over everything else. Raphael pulled up a particular page. But David was right about one thing. This information is devastating. If it got to the right prosecutors, with the right evidence to back it up, it would take down half of Caruso's organization, Marco finished. At least Raphael created a new spreadsheet on his laptop, beginning to map connections. Every name, every account, every property. We cross-reference this with what I know about Caruso's operations, add in the suspicious deaths, and we start to see the full picture. They worked through the night, building a comprehensive map of Dante Caruso's criminal empire. Money laundering through construction companies, drug distribution through legitimate trucking firms, political influence purchased through campaign contributions and outright bribes. Violence enforced through loyal soldiers and hired specialists like Vincent Torres. By dawn they had something unprecedented. A complete X-ray of a major criminal organization, showing every bone and organ, every strength and weakness. This is it, Juliet said, looking at the final map on Raphael's laptop screen. This is how we take him down. Not yet, Raphael cautioned. Information is useless without power. Caruso's got protection at every level, cops, judges, prosecutors. We hand this to the wrong person, it disappears. Or worse, it gets back to Caruso and he knows we're coming. So what do? Raphael smiled, predatory and cold. We don't hand it to anyone. We use it ourselves. Hit his weak points one by one. Cut off his money, scatter his soldiers, eliminate his protection. By the time anyone realizes what's happening, Caruso's empire will be collapsing around him. That'll take time, Marco warned. And if he figures out you're alive and behind it, he won't. Because as far as Caruso knows, I'm dying slowly in a hospital bed. My heart damaged from surgical complications. Raphael looked at Juliet. You've bought us the most valuable thing in war, time and the element of surprise. Juliet studied the map, her brother's documentation overlaid with Raphael's criminal intelligence. Somewhere in this web of corruption and violence was justice for David. She just had to be patient enough to find it. So we start hitting his operation, she said. Where first? Raphael pointed to a section of the map, a warehouse district near the docks. Here. Caruso's main weapons storage. We take it down, we cut off his enforcement capability. And we do it in a way that looks like a rival gang making a move, not a strategic attack. When? 3 days. Marco, start gathering our people. Quietly. No one knows the real target until the last moment. Marco nodded and left to make calls. Juliet remained, looking at the map, thinking about her brother. About how David had tried to fight Caruso with information and rules and faith in the system. She was fighting him with Raphael Moretti and a criminal's toolkit. David would have been horrified. But David was dead, and Juliet was tired of being powerless. 3 days, she repeated. Then it begins. Raphael met her eyes. Then it begins. End of section 5. Word count. 903 running total. 4,591 word sections remaining. 7. The warehouse at Pier 7 sat dark and silent at 2 in the morning. Security cameras swept the perimeter on predictable patterns, and 2 guards made rounds every 30 minutes like clockwork. Caruso had grown complacent. After all, who would be stupid enough to hit his main weapons depot? Raphael watched from a van 3 blocks away, monitoring feeds on a laptop. Marco had placed cameras the day before, disguised as electrical junction boxes. Now they had a complete view of Caruso's security setup. 6 guards inside, 2 outside, Marco reported through the earpiece. Shipment came in yesterday, crates from the docks. Probably enough firepower to arm 50 men. Not after tonight, Raphael said. He keyed his radio. Team 1 move in. Clean and quiet. Juliet sat beside him in the van, wearing dark clothes and a nervous expression. This was her first time witnessing Raphael's world in action, and the reality of it was more unsettling than she'd imagined. "You didn't have to come," Raphael said without looking at her. "Yes, I did. If I'm part of this, I need to see what it really means." She watched the laptop screen as shadowy figures approached the warehouse. "How many of your men?" 8. All veterans. They know the job." Raphael's voice was calm, professional. "No killing unless absolutely necessary. We're not here for bodies, we're here to send a message." The first guard went down silently, drug dart to the neck. The second never saw the man behind him until it was too late. Team 1 moved through the warehouse like ghosts, neutralizing guards with practiced efficiency. No shots fired. No alarms triggered. Within 12 minutes, they controlled the building. "Phase 2, Raphael ordered. Trucks rolled up to the loading dock, not Raphael's vehicles, but stolen ones that would lead back to the Southside Disciples, a gang that had been feuding with Caruso for months. Raphael's men loaded crates of weapons and ammunition, working quickly and systematically. But they didn't take everything. That would be obvious. Instead, they took exactly 60%. Enough to cripple Caruso's operation, but leave enough behind to make it look like a rival gang making a score rather than a strategic attack. "Boss, we got a problem," Marco's voice crackled through the radio. One of the guards woke up early. "He's reaching for the alarm." Raphael's jaw tightened. "Contain him. No violence." "Already done. Kid's back to sleep." Juliet exhaled slowly, not realizing she'd been holding her breath. 28 minutes after the operation began, the trucks pulled away. Raphael's team vanished into the night, leaving behind confused guards who would wake with headaches and no memory of what happened. The weapons were already en route to an FBI storage facility, delivered anonymously with detailed documentation of serial numbers and illegal modifications. "First cut made," Raphael said, closing the laptop. "Caruso just lost his teeth." The second strike came 36 hours later, and was quieter but more devastating. Juliet sat in a coffee shop across from Theodore Park, a forensic accountant with the IRS. He was in his 50s, tired-looking, the kind of man who'd spent his career chasing paper trails that never quite led anywhere important. "I appreciate you meeting me," Juliet said, sliding an envelope across the table. "I know this is unusual. You said it was about my brother's case." Ted's voice was carefully neutral. "The IRS doesn't usually discuss investigations with civilians." "I'm not asking you to discuss anything. I'm giving you information." Juliet kept her voice low. "My brother David worked as an accountant before he died. He kept records, detailed records of financial crimes he was forced to participate in. Money laundering, tax fraud, offshore accounts." Ted's expression didn't change, but his eyes sharpened with interest. "How detailed?" "Account numbers, transfer dates, shell company structures, payment routes through 17 legitimate businesses that actually serve as fronts for organized crime." She pushed the envelope closer. "Everything is documented. Everything can be verified. I just need someone who can do something with it." "And why bring this to me specifically?" "Because 3 years ago, you investigated a construction company called Millennium Development. You found irregularities but didn't have enough evidence to prosecute. The case was closed." Juliet met his eyes. "Millennium Development is in these files, along with 12 other companies owned by the same criminal organization. This time you'll have everything you need." Ted opened the envelope carefully, scanning the first few pages. His tired expression transformed into something hungry, focused. These were the kinds of financial crimes prosecutors dreamed about: clear, documented, prosecutable. "Who put this together?" "My brother. Before he died." Juliet stood. "The flash drive has everything. If you verify even half of it, you'll have the biggest case of your career. But you need to move fast. These are dangerous people, and they've already killed to protect these secrets. Miss Chun, don't contact me again. I was never here. But please do something with this information." Make it count. She left before he could respond, knowing she just set financial chaos in motion. Within 48 hours, the IRS would freeze accounts. The FBI would open investigations. Caruso's money, the lifeblood of his empire, would start drying up. The third strike was personal. Marcus Webb sat in his car outside a diner in Oak Park, hands shaking as he smoked his fourth cigarette in 20 minutes. He'd been with Caruso for 8 years, climbing from soldier to lieutenant, earning trust through loyalty and violence. But lately he'd been having doubts. Too many bodies. Too many innocent people caught in crossfire. His daughter had just turned 6, and every time he looked at her, he wondered what she'd think of him if she knew what he really did. A knock on his window made him jump. A man stood there, not threatening, just waiting. Marcus rolled down the window. "Marcus Webb?" the man asked. "Who wants to know?" "Someone who can offer you a way out." The man handed him a business card. "FBI, Special Agent Sarah Chun. Your boss is going down. Multiple investigations, federal and state. When it happens, everyone close to him goes down too. Unless they cooperate first." Marcus's stomach twisted. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Yes, you do. You know about the murders, the money laundering, the political corruption. You know where the bodies are buried, literally and figuratively." The man leaned closer. "You've got a daughter. Pretty little girl. Piano lessons on Thursdays, right? You want her visiting you in federal prison for the next 20 years. You threatening my kid?" Marcus's hand moved toward his waistband. "I'm offering you a choice. Immunity for testimony. Protection for your family. A chance to do the right thing before it's too late." The man straightened. "Agent Chun will be at that number for the next 24 hours. After that, the offer expires. Think about what matters more, loyalty to Caruso or watching your daughter grow up." The man walked away, disappearing into the evening crowd. Marcus sat frozen, the business card burning in his hand. He thought about his daughter, about his wife who didn't know what he really did, about the murders he'd witnessed and the ones he'd committed, about whether redemption was still possible. 22 hours later, he called the number. The fourth strike followed the same pattern. Isabella Rodriguez, Caruso's logistics coordinator, received a similar visit. She'd been skimming money for years, terrified Caruso would find out. The FBI offered immunity and protection. She took the deal within 12 hours. 2 of Caruso's most trusted lieutenants flipped in the span of 3 days. They brought with them access codes, communication channels, safe house locations, operational details. Everything Raphael needed to see inside Caruso's organization. And Caruso had no idea it was happening. 1 week after the warehouse raid, Raphael reviewed the damage assessment with Marco and Juliet. "The weapons depot hit is being blamed on the Southside disciples," Marco reported. "Caruso sent retaliatory shooters. Gang war is escalating exactly like we wanted." "The financial investigations?" Raphael looked at Juliet. "IRS froze 8 accounts yesterday. FBI opened cases on 6 companies. Caruso's lawyers are scrambling, but they don't know how deep the documentation goes." She pulled up her tablet. "Estimated financial impact, $12 to $15 million locked down. Maybe more as investigations expand. And our new friends. Marcus and Isabella are in protective custody, giving statements." Marco grinned. "They're singing like canaries. Everything from murder contracts to political bribes. The FBI is building a RICO case that could take down Caruso's entire upper management." Raphael nodded slowly, satisfied. 1 week. For precision strikes. Caruso's empire was bleeding from multiple wounds, and he still thought Raphael Moretti was dying in a hospital bed. "He'll start to panic soon," Raphael said. "When he does, he'll make mistakes. Get paranoid. Lash out at his own people. That's when we hit him hardest," Juliet said. "When he's off balance and desperate." Exactly. Raphael closed his laptop. "But we need to be careful. A cornered animal is dangerous. Caruso survived this long because he's smart. If he figures out what's really happening. His phone buzzed. An unknown number. Raphael answered cautiously. Hello. A familiar voice dripping with false warmth. Raphael. I heard you were in the hospital. Cardiac problems, they tell me. Such a shame. Dante Caruso. Raphael's eyes met Juliet's, and he put the phone on speaker. Dante, what do you want? Just checking on an old friend. You know, to make sure you're getting the best care. I'd hate for anything unfortunate to happen during your recovery. The threat was barely veiled. Hospitals can be dangerous places. So many things can go wrong. I'm being well taken care of. I'm sure you are. But Raphael, Caruso's voice hardened. Watch yourself. Chicago's getting messy lately. Gangs fighting. Money problems. People disappearing. It would be terrible if you got caught in the crossfire. Especially in your weakened condition. The call ended. Raphael set down the phone, his expression grim. He's feeling the pressure. Testing to see if I'm really as weak as he thinks. What do we do? Juliet asked. We accelerate the plan. Hit him harder, faster. Before he figures out I'm the one holding the knife. End of section 6. Word count. 900 running total. 5,491 word sections remaining 6. Vincent Torres made his first mistake on a Tuesday morning in Milwaukee. He'd been careful, new identity, cash-only transactions, no phone calls, no internet. He'd done this before, disappearing after a job went wrong. Usually, he'd lay low for a few months, then resurface when Caruso needed him again. But this time felt different. The Chicago job had gone sideways. Raphael Moretti had survived. And Vincent had seen the nurse, Juliet Chen, watching him with knowing eyes. She'd stopped him. Deliberately. Which meant she knew. He should have run further. Should have left the country entirely. But Caruso still owed him $50,000 for the attempt, and Vincent needed that money to disappear properly. So he made the call. It's me, Vincent said, using the burner phone for the first time in 10 days. I need my payment. I did the work. You failed. Caruso's voice was ice. Moretti's alive. Barely. The oxygen damage worked. You said he's in cardiac failure. What I said doesn't matter. The job was to eliminate him. You didn't. Caruso paused. Where are you? Vincent's instinct screamed. Doesn't matter. Just wire the money to. You think I'm paying you for failure? Come back to Chicago. We'll discuss it in person. I'm not stupid, Dante. Wire the money, or I start talking to people about our arrangement. Is that a threat? It's a fact. I've kept records. Dates, locations, payments. Insurance in case something like this happened. Vincent was bluffing. But Caruso didn't know that. $50,000. That's all I want. Then I disappear, and you never hear from me again. Silence on the line. Then fine. Milwaukee, right? There's a bar called the Copper Tap on Brady Street. Be there tomorrow night, 8 p.m. Bring the records. I'll bring your money, and we'll call it even. How did you? The line went dead. Vincent stared at the phone, his blood running cold. He hadn't said he was in Milwaukee, which meant Caruso had traced the call. Which meant he was already dead unless he ran. Now. Marco burst into Raphael's suite at St. Catherine's, his phone in hand and excitement on his face. Boss, we got him. Vincent Torres. He just called Caruso from Milwaukee. Raphael sat up, alert immediately. You're monitoring Caruso's phones. Marcus gave us access before he flipped. We've been listening to everything. Marco played the recording of Vincent's call. Torres is spooked. Desperate for money. Caruso set up a meeting. Which is really a kill order, Raphael finished. Caruso can't let Torres live. Not with everything falling apart around him. Juliet entered from the adjoining room, drawn by the commotion. You found Vincent. Caruso found him first. But we know where he'll be tomorrow night. Raphael's mind was already working through scenarios. This is our chance. We get to Torres before Caruso does, and we get his testimony about all the murders, including David's. Caruso will have shooters there, Marco warned. The copper tap will be a death trap. Then we get there first. Extract Torres before Caruso's people arrive. Rafael looked at Marco. How many men can you have in Milwaukee by tomorrow? 6, maybe 8 if I push it. Do it. I want Torres alive and protected. He's the key to connecting Caruso directly to multiple murders. Juliet stepped forward. I'm coming too. Absolutely not, Rafael said immediately. This is going to be violent. Caruso will send his best killers. Vincent Torres killed my brother. I've earned the right to face him. Juliet's voice was steel. And if we're going to get his testimony, he needs to see me. Needs to know I survived his attempt on you and that I know everything. Rafael wanted to argue but recognized the determination in her eyes. He'd seen that look in mirrors for 30 years. The look of someone who'd crossed the line and couldn't go back. You stay in the van with surveillance. You don't engage. Agreed. Agreed. The Copper Tap was a dive bar in Milwaukee's Lower East Side. The kind of place where nobody asked questions and the bartender kept a shotgun under the counter. Vincent Torres arrived at 7:30, 30 minutes early, choosing a booth in the back where he could watch the door. He ordered whiskey and tried to calm his nerves. Maybe Caruso would actually pay him. Maybe this whole thing would end cleanly, and Vincent could disappear to Mexico or Central America, somewhere Caruso's reach didn't extend. He almost believed it. At 7:45, a woman walked in, young, professional-looking, out of place in this dump. She scanned the bar, spotted Vincent, and walked directly to his booth. Vincent's hand moved toward his gun. Don't, Juliet said calmly, sliding into the seat across from him. I'm not here to hurt you. I'm here to save your life. Vincent recognized her immediately, the nurse from Rafael Moretti's surgery. How did you find you? Same way Caruso did. We've been monitoring his communications since you called him. Juliet leaned forward. Vincent, Caruso's not bringing you money tonight. He's bringing shooters. You're a loose end and he's tying you off. You're lying. He needs me. He needed you when his operations were stable. Now they're collapsing. Federal investigations, frozen accounts, lieutenants turning informant. Caruso's losing control. And you're a witness to multiple murders. He can't afford to let you live. Vincent's face went pale. I've got insurance. Records of all the jobs. Then you'll trade those records for protection. FBI immunity, witness security. A new life. Juliet pulled out a business card. The same FBI agent who'd flipped Marcus Webb. Or you can wait for Caruso's people to arrive in 15 minutes and see how that works out. Vincent stared at the card, then at Juliet. Why should I trust you? Because 3 years ago you murdered my brother, Davidson. You killed him using the same method you tried on Rafael Moretti. Oxygen deprivation during surgery. Juliet's voice was steady, but her eyes burned with controlled rage. I want justice for David. That means you testifying against Caruso. Telling prosecutors everything, every murder, every job, every payment. You do that and you get to live. And if I refuse, then Caruso's shooters will be here soon. And I'll walk away and let them finish you. Your choice. Vincent looked at the door, then back at Juliet. He'd killed a lot of people over the years, but he'd always rationalized it as just business, just survival. Now, facing the sister of one of his victims, he couldn't hide behind those lies anymore. The records are in a storage unit. I can get them. Good. My people are outside. We leave now, quietly through the back. FBI takes you into custody, and you start talking. Juliet stood. Move. Vincent hesitated one more second, then followed her toward the rear exit. They just stepped into the alley when 3 SUVs screeched to a stop at the front of the bar. Men in dark clothes emerged, weapons concealed but ready. Caruso's cleanup crew, arriving exactly on schedule. Marco grabbed Vincent and shoved him into a waiting van. Juliet jumped in after them, and they peeled away seconds before Caruso's men stormed the copper tap. Inside the van, Raphael sat waiting, very much alive and very much interested in what Vincent Torres had to say. "Hello, Vincent," Raphael said calmly. "I believe we have unfinished business." Vincent stared at him in shock. "You're supposed to be dying. Cardiac failure." "Turns out medical reports can be misleading." Raphael smiled without warmth. "Now let's talk about all the people you've killed for Dante Caruso. Starting with David Chun." As the van drove through Milwaukee's dark streets toward the FBI field office, Vincent Torres began to talk. And with every word, the case against Dante Caruso grew stronger. 200 miles away in Chicago, Caruso sat in his downtown penthouse, phone pressed to his ear. "He's gone," his lieutenant reported. Torres wasn't at the bar. Someone got to him first. Caruso's jaw tightened. First the warehouse, then the financial investigations, then his lieutenants turning. Now Torres disappearing. Someone was moving against him systematically, professionally. And Caruso was starting to suspect he knew who. "What's the latest on Rafael Moretti?" he asked. "Still at St. Catherine's. Still in cardiac care. Our source says he's weak, might not make it." "Your source is lying or stupid." Caruso stood, looking out over the Chicago skyline. "Get me confirmation. Visual confirmation. I want to see Moretti with my own eyes. Because if he's not dying in that hospital bed..." He didn't finish the sentence. Didn't need to. If Rafael Moretti was alive and functional, then everything that had gone wrong in the past 2 weeks suddenly made perfect sense. And if that was true, Caruso's empire was in more danger than he'd realized. Also, Caruso added, "Prepare the estate. Full security. I want 20 men there by tomorrow. If this is a war, I'm not fighting it from an exposed position." He ended the call and poured himself a drink, his mind racing through scenarios and contingencies. Someone was coming for him, and for the first time in 20 years Dante Caruso felt afraid. End of section 7. Word count. 900 running total. 6,391 word sections remaining 5. Vincent Torres sat in an FBI interrogation room, handcuffed to the table, a recording device capturing every word. Special Agent Sarah Chun, no relation to Juliet, though Vincent didn't know that, sat across from him with a stack of immunity documents. "Let's start with David Chun," Agent Chun said. "Walk me through it." Vincent swallowed hard. August 2022. Mercy General Hospital. Caruso called me, said there was a problem that needed handling. An accountant who'd gotten cold feet about his work arrangement. David Chun. In the observation room, Juliet watched through one-way glass, her hands clenched into fists. Raphael stood beside her, silent but present. "Caruso paid me $25,000 up front," Vincent continued. "Standard rate for a surgical elimination. I got hired as a temp surgical tech, fake credentials but good enough for their background check. The surgery was routine appendicitis. I waited until they were deep into the procedure, then adjusted the oxygen flow. Slow reduction, nothing sudden. By the time anyone noticed, his brain was already starving." Juliet's breath caught. Hearing it described so clinically, so casually, made David's death feel fresh again. "How many others?" Agent Chun asked. 14 total over 5 years. Caruso used me when he needed someone eliminated without noise. Politicians, witnesses, competitors, people who knew too much. Vincent pulled out a notebook from his jacket, the insurance he'd mentioned. "I kept records. Names, dates, payments, hospital locations. Everything." Agent Chun took the notebook, flipping through pages of meticulous documentation. Each entry was a murder, carefully recorded and catalogued. "This is enough," she said quietly. "This is enough to bury Caruso for life." Back at St. Catherine's that evening, Raphael assembled his remaining crew in the suite. 8 men, all veterans of his organization, all loyal enough to follow him into what might be a suicide mission. Caruso's retreated to his estate in Lake Forest, Raphael explained, displaying aerial photos on his laptop. 10 acres, heavy security, 20 armed men minimum. He knows something's coming. He just doesn't know exactly what. We hit him there, it's a fortress, Marco said. Even with 8 guys in surprise, those odds are bad. We're not hitting him with 8 guys. Raphael pulled up another screen, communication intercepts, personnel manifests, shift schedules. Marcus Webb gave us access to Caruso's security network before he flipped. I've been watching for 3 days. And I've found something interesting. He pointed to a name on the security roster. Michael Benedetti, head of Caruso's estate security. Michael's been with Caruso for 12 years. Loyal soldier, never questioned orders. Raphael smiled coldly. Until 2 months ago when Caruso had his nephew killed for skimming money. The nephew was Michael's godson. So Michael's got a grudge, Marco said slowly. More than a grudge. He's been waiting for a chance to pay Caruso back. And I'm about to give him that chance. Raphael picked up his phone. Marco, you know how to reach Michael. I can get to him. Do it. Tell him we're moving tomorrow night. Tell him if he opens the right doors at the right time, we'll make sure he walks away clean when this is over. Juliet found Raphael on the suite's balcony an hour later, staring out at the Chicago skyline. He looked tired, the weight of decades in this life showing in the set of his shoulders. Vincent's testimony is solid, she said. The FBI's building a RICO case. Even if tomorrow goes wrong, Caruso's finished. If tomorrow goes wrong, Caruso disappears, Raphael replied. He's got escape routes, offshore money we haven't found, connections in other countries. The FBI can indict him, but catching him is different. He turned to face her. That's why we need to end this tomorrow. While he's still here, still accessible. What if he knows you're coming? He suspects, but he doesn't know for certain. And that doubt will slow him down, make him hesitate. Raphael paused. You should stay here tomorrow. This isn't your fight anymore. Vincent's in custody, the case is built. You've done what you set out to do. Juliet shook her head. I need to see it through. Need to see Caruso answer for what he did. It might get ugly. People might die. People have already died. 14 that we know of, probably more. She met his gaze steadily. I'm not asking to carry a gun or storm the building. But I'm going to be there when Caruso falls. I owe David that much. Raphael studied her for a long moment, then nodded. You stay with surveillance. You see it happening but you don't participate. Agreed. Agreed. They stood in silence for a moment. 2 people who'd started as strangers and become something else through shared purpose and shared loss. After tomorrow, Raphael said quietly, assuming we survive, what will you do? Go back to being a nurse. Save lives instead of ending them. Juliet looked out at the city. What about you? I don't know. This life has been all I've known for 30 years. But lately he trailed off. Lately I've been thinking maybe there's a way out. A way to step back, let it all go. You think Caruso's organization will let you walk away? Caruso's organization won't exist after tomorrow. And my own people, most of them are tired. Tired of fighting, tired of looking over their shoulders, tired of burying friends. Raphael smiled without humor. Maybe it's time for all of us to find a different path. That's a nice thought. But first, we have to survive tomorrow. The next evening, as sunset painted Lake Michigan orange and gold, 3 vehicles rolled toward Caruso's estate. Raphael rode in the lead SUV with Marco and 4 other men. Juliet was in the surveillance van a quarter-mile back, watching feeds from cameras Marco had positioned around the property. Michael Benedetti had agreed to the plan. At exactly 8 p.m., he would disable the estate's electronic security and unlock the east gate. Raphael's team would have a 5-minute window to get inside before Caruso's other security personnel realized what was happening. 2 minutes, Marco said, checking his watch. Raphael checked his weapon, his movements automatic after decades of violence. But this felt different. This wasn't about territory or money or power. This was about justice, messy, complicated, but real. You good, boss? Marco asked. Yeah, I'm good. Raphael keyed his radio. Juliet, you reading us? Loud and clear. Thermal imaging shows 23 people inside the main house, 6 in the guest quarters, 4 on perimeter patrol. Copy that. Raphael took a breath. All teams remember, we're not here for a massacre. We're here for Caruso. Anyone who doesn't fight, we let walk. Anyone who surrenders, we take into custody. But anyone who raises a weapon, we put them down, Marco finished. The vehicles stopped 100 yards from the east gate. Raphael could see the mansion through the trees, lit up like a fortress, every window glowing, every entrance guarded. Somewhere in there, Dante Caruso waited. 30 seconds, Marco said. Raphael thought about David Chun, killed in an operating room because he tried to do the right thing. He thought about the 13 other victims, their lives erased with clinical precision. He thought about Juliet, who'd saved his life to avenge her brother. This ended tonight. 10 seconds. Raphael chambered around. 5, 4, 3, 2-inch. The lights on the estate flickered once, then died. Emergency lighting kicked in a second later, but the security systems were down. The east gate swung open, pushed by Michael Benedetti's hand. Go, Raphael ordered. The vehicles surged forward into the darkness, toward the final confrontation with Dante Caruso. End of Section 8. Word count. 900 running total. 7,291 word sections remaining 4. The mansion's interior was chaos. Caruso's guards scrambled in the darkness, shouting orders, trying to understand why their systems had failed. Some reached for weapons. Others ran for exits. Raphael's team moved through the confusion like surgical instruments, precise, efficient, overwhelming. 2 guards went down with tranquilizer darts. 3 more surrendered immediately when they saw they were outmatched. Michael Benedetti appeared from a side hallway, directing Raphael's men toward the main study. Caruso's upstairs, Michael said. 3rd floor, his personal office. He's got 4 men with him. His core security. You did good, Raphael said. Now get out. Take anyone who wants to surrender with you. This doesn't have to be a bloodbath. Michael nodded and started calling orders to the remaining guards. Anyone who doesn't want to die tonight, put your weapons down and walk out the front door. This isn't your fight anymore. More guards emerged from various rooms, assessing the situation, making the smart choice. They laid down their guns and filed toward the exit, hands raised. Within minutes, half of Caruso's force had evaporated. Raphael's team reached the 3rd floor stairwell. Marco held up a hand, signaling for silence. They could hear voices above, tense, arguing. Told you this was a mistake. We should have left the city when. Shut up and cover the door. Caruso's voice sharp with fear and rage. Raphael keyed his radio. Juliet's status. From the surveillance van, Juliet watched thermal imaging. 4 hostiles with Caruso in the office. They're armed, positioned defensively. Raphael, they know you're coming. Good. Raphael started up the stairs. I want them scared. The office door was solid oak, locked from the inside. Raphael's men took positions on either side. Marco pulled out a small breaching charge, but before he could place it, a voice called from inside. Moretti? That you out there? Raphael smiled coldly. Hello, Dante. We need to talk. You're supposed to be dying. Cardiac failure. Turns out that was exaggerated. Funny how medical records can be misleading. Raphael's voice was calm, almost conversational. Open the door, Dante. Let's end this like civilized people. Gunshots erupted through the door, splintering wood but hitting no one. Raphael's team had anticipated that. Or we can do it the hard way, Raphael continued unfazed. Your choice. But know this, your organization is finished. The FBI has Vincent Torres in custody. He's told them everything. 14 murders including David Chun. Every detail, every payment, every hospital. Silence from inside the office. They've also got Marcus Webb and Isabella Rodriguez, Raphael continued. Your money's frozen. Your political protection is gone. Your soldiers are either arrested or running. You've got nowhere to go, Dante. It's over. If it's over, why are you here? Caruso shouted back. Why not let the FBI handle it? Because I wanted to see your face when you realized you lost. More silence. Then the sound of locks turning. The door opened slowly. Dante Caruso stood in the doorway, gun in hand but pointed at the floor. He looked older than Raphael remembered. Grayer, thinner, exhausted. Behind him, his 4 remaining guards held weapons but seemed uncertain, waiting for orders that weren't coming. You really want to do this? Caruso asked. Throw away everything we built, everything we survived, over some accountant who couldn't handle the business. His name was David Chun, a new voice said. Juliet stepped into view from behind Raphael's men, her presence commanding immediate attention. Caruso's eyes widened in recognition. The nurse from the hospital, the one who'd been in the operating room. You, Caruso breathed. You stopped Vincent. You saved Moretti. I did. Juliet walked forward calmly, stopping beside Raphael. Because I knew what you were trying to do. I'd seen your method before. 3 years ago, when you murdered my brother. Caruso's face went pale. David Chun was your brother. He was. And you killed him for trying to leave your organization. You had Vincent Torres slowly suffocate him during surgery, making it look like medical complications. Juliet's voice was steady, but her eyes burned. You killed him because he wanted to do the right thing. Because he couldn't live with laundering your blood money anymore. Business decision, Caruso said weakly. Nothing personal. It was personal to me. Juliet took another step forward. You took my brother. You took 13 other people. You thought you were untouchable, that your method was perfect, that no one would ever figure it out. She paused. You were wrong. Caruso looked between Juliet and Raphael, understanding finally dawning. This whole thing, the attacks on my operation, the federal investigations, everything falling apart. This was both of you. Surprised? Raphael asked. You tried to have me killed. You didn't expect me to return the favor. With her help, Caruso laughed bitterly. A mob boss and a nurse. That's what brings me down. That's what ends 20 years of careful work. 20 years of murder, Juliet corrected. 20 years of thinking you were smarter than everyone else. But you made mistakes, Dante. You used the same method too many times. You kept Vincent Torres alive too long. You underestimated people who had nothing to lose and everything to gain from your destruction. Federal agents suddenly poured into the hallway behind Raphael's team. Agent Sarah Chun leading them, weapons drawn, badges displayed. Dante Caruso, Agent Chun announced. You're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, racketeering, money laundering, and 14 counts of first-degree murder. Drop your weapon. Caruso looked at his gun, then at the overwhelming force surrounding him. His 4 guards had already lowered their weapons, hands raised in surrender. There was no escape, no last-minute play, no miracle save. He was finished and he knew it. How? Caruso asked, looking at Raphael. How did you coordinate all this? Simple, Raphael said. I had something you never did, someone who wanted justice more than revenge. Someone who built the case properly, documented everything, made sure it would stick. He gestured to Juliet. She did the real work. I just provided the resources. Caruso's eyes fixed on Juliet with something between respect and hatred. You should have let Moretti die. Should have walked away clean. I couldn't. Juliet's voice was quiet but firm. Not after what you did to David. Not after watching you kill people for years without consequences. Someone had to stop you. Someone had to make sure you answered for every life you took. And now? Caruso asked. You feel better? You feel like you got your justice? Juliet thought about David, His smile, his terrible jokes, his belief that people were fundamentally good. She thought about the 3 years of grief and helplessness and rage she'd carried. "No," she admitted. "I don't feel better. David's still dead. Those 13 other people are still gone. Nothing changes that." She stepped closer to Caruso, looking him directly in the eyes. "But you won't kill anyone else. You won't hurt anyone else's family. You won't walk free while your victims are forgotten. That's not justice, maybe. But it's something." Agent Chan moved forward with handcuffs. "Mr. Caruso, hands behind your back." Caruso complied, his empire crumbling around him with every click of the cuffs. As federal agents led him away, he looked back once at Raphael and Juliet. "This isn't over," he said. "Yes," Raphael replied calmly. "It is." They watched as Caruso was escorted down the stairs, read his rights, processed like any other criminal. His guards were cuffed and taken away. His mansion, his fortress, was secured as a crime scene. Michael Benedetti approached Raphael as the last of Caruso's men were let out. We're good. FBI will want your testimony, but Agent Chun knows you helped. You'll walk." Michael nodded, relief evident on his face. "My nephew. He didn't deserve what Caruso did to him." "No, he didn't." Raphael put a hand on Michael's shoulder. "Go home. Be with your family. This life, it's over now." As Michael walked away, Juliet turned to Raphael. "Is it over?" Raphael looked around at the remnants of Caruso's empire. The mansion that would be seized, the organization that would be dismantled, the power structure that would collapse. "Yeah," he said quietly. "I think it finally is." End of section 9. Word count 900. Running total 8,191 words. Sections remaining 3. The next 3 weeks passed in a blur of federal interviews, depositions, and legal proceedings. Vincent Torres's testimony, combined with David's documentation and the statements from Marcus Webb and Isabella Rodriguez, built an airtight case against Dante Caruso. Federal prosecutors announced indictments on 47 counts including murder, racketeering, money laundering, and conspiracy. Caruso's organization collapsed like a house of cards. His lieutenants either fled, turned state's evidence, or were arrested. His businesses were seized. His assets were frozen. The empire he'd built over 20 years dismantled in less than a month. Raphael watched it all from the safety of St. Catherine's, officially still recovering from his injuries, unofficially orchestrating the final cleanup of Chicago's underworld. The FBI knew about his involvement. Agent Chun had made that clear, but they'd made an informal arrangement. Raphael's cooperation in bringing down Caruso bought him a degree of immunity, provided he didn't interfere with the prosecution. It was the closest thing to a clean slate Raphael had ever been offered. Juliet returned to her normal life at St. Helena Hospital, working her shifts, saving lives, trying to pretend the past month hadn't fundamentally changed her. But it had. She'd crossed lines she'd never imagined crossing. She'd allied with a criminal, participated in taking down another criminal, and watched people get arrested because of her actions. David would have been horrified, or maybe proud. She couldn't decide which. On a cold November evening, Raphael called her. "Can you come to St. Catherine's? I'd like to talk." She found him in the suite sitting area, dressed in civilian clothes for the first time since she'd met him. He looked different without the hospital gown or the tactical gear, smaller, more human, older. "How are you feeling?" Juliet asked, sitting across from him. "Physically, almost back to normal. Emotionally." Raphael smiled without humor. "I'm not sure I remember what normal feels like. I know the feeling." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Outside, Chicago's skyline glittered in the twilight. "The FBI came to see me yesterday," Raphael said. "Official visit. They wanted to make sure I understood the terms of our arrangement." "Which are?" "I cooperate fully with Caruso's prosecution. I provide any additional information they need. And I start dismantling my own operations. Raphael leaned back. They're giving me a way out, Juliet. A clean exit from this life. All I have to do is walk away. And will you? I'm considering it. Seriously considering it. He looked at her directly. But I wanted to talk to you first. To make you an offer. Juliet's stomach tightened. What kind of offer? The kind where you don't go back to being just a nurse. Where you use your intelligence, your strategic thinking, your ability to see patterns others miss. Raphael stood, walking to the window. I'm dismantling my organization, yes. But there are aspects of what I do that aren't entirely criminal. Security consulting, private investigation, helping people who fall through the cracks of the legal system. You want me to work for you? With me? Not for me. Raphael turned back. What we did with Caruso, that took both of us. Your knowledge, my resources. Your morality, my pragmatism. We made a good team, Juliet. We could continue that. Help people who need justice but can't get it through normal channels. Juliet shook her head slowly. No. Just like that? No consideration. I don't need to consider it. She stood, facing him. Raphael, I helped you because I had no other choice. The system failed David. The police couldn't touch Caruso. The FBI couldn't build a case. I needed you because you operated outside the rules. And now Caruso's in custody. The case is built. Justice, messy and complicated as it is being served through the proper channels. Juliet walked toward the door. I'm not cut out for your world. What we did was necessary, but it doesn't mean I belong in it permanently. Raphael nodded, not surprised but perhaps disappointed. You're probably right. You've got a conscience. That's a liability in my business. It's not a liability. It's what separates justice from revenge. Juliet paused at the door. What you're planning, dismantling your operations, going legitimate, that's good. That's the right choice. But I can't be part of it. I need to go back to who I was before all this. Can you? Go back. Raphael's question was gentle, not challenging. After everything you've seen, everything you've done. Juliet was silent for a moment. I don't know. But I have to try. Because the alternative is becoming someone I don't recognize. Someone David wouldn't recognize. Your brother would be proud of what you did. Taking down his killer. My brother would be sad that it came to this. That the only way to get justice was to ally with criminals and operate outside the law. Juliet's voice was soft but firm. David believed in the system, even when it failed him. I have to believe in it too. Have to trust that Caruso's prosecution will stick, that the case we built will hold up, that justice will actually be served. Raphael smiled sadly. You're a better person than me. No. Just a different person. You survived in a world that required moral flexibility. I survived in a world that required moral clarity. Neither of us is better, we're just different. She opened the door then turned back. What will you do? After you dismantle everything? Raphael looked out at the city he'd controlled for so long. I honestly don't know. Maybe consulting, like I said. Maybe disappear entirely. Find a quiet town somewhere and pretend to be normal, he laughed softly. After 30 years of violence, normalcy sounds exotic. It's not easy being normal, but it's worth trying. Is that advice from Nurse Chan, or from Juliet? Both. She smiled slightly. Take care of yourself, Raphael. Get out of this life while you still can. Don't wait until it destroys what's left of your soul. Too late for that, maybe. It's never too late. Look at what you did. You helped take down Caruso, saved lives, gave families closure. That counts for something. Build on it. Raphael met her eyes, and for a moment, they were just two people who'd survived something terrible together. Not allies, not friends, but something harder to define. Thank you, Raphael said quietly. For saving my life. For trusting me enough to work together. For showing me that maybe there's still a way forward that doesn't end in a prison cell or a bullet. You're welcome. And thank you for helping me get justice for David. I couldn't have done it without you. We were a good team. even if only temporarily. We were. Juliet stepped into the hallway. Goodbye, Raphael. Goodbye, Juliet. The door closed between them with a soft click. Over the following weeks, Raphael began the complex process of dismantling his organization. Assets were liquidated. Territories were ceded. Soldiers were released from their obligations, free to find legitimate work or face the consequences of their choices. Some of his men took the exit gratefully, tired of looking over their shoulders, ready for normal lives. Others couldn't adapt, and Raphael quietly provided information to law enforcement, helping them sweep up the ones who wouldn't stop. Marco stayed to the end, helping Raphael tie up loose ends, but even he was ready to leave when it was done. What will you do? Raphael asked as they finalized the last transfers. My daughter's in San Diego. Haven't seen her in 5 years because this life was too dangerous for family visits. Marco smiled, genuine warmth in his expression. Think I'll move out there. Be a grandfather. Pretend I never spent 30 years as a mob enforcer. That sounds nice. What about you, boss? Raphael looked around his office at St. Catherine's, the place he'd recovered, planned, and orchestrated the end of Caruso's empire. I'm thinking somewhere quiet. Maybe Montana. Maybe overseas. Somewhere I can disappear and no one will care who I used to be. You earned that. After everything, you earned peace. Maybe. Raphael extended his hand. Thanks, Marco. For everything. They shook hands, a final goodbye between men who'd survived wars together. When Marco left, Raphael was alone with his thoughts and his choices. For the first time in 30 years, the future was undefined. And surprisingly, that didn't terrify him. It felt like possibility. End of section 10. Word count. 900 running total. 9,091 word sections remaining 2. 6 months later, Juliet stood in the trauma bay at St. Helena Hospital, her hand steady as she assisted with a gunshot victim. The patient was young, maybe 20, caught in crossfire from a gang dispute, the kind of senseless violence Chicago churned out regularly. Pressures dropping, the attending physician called out, "We need to move faster." Juliet adjusted the flow, monitored vitals, anticipated needs before they were spoken. The rhythm of emergency medicine had returned to her like muscle memory. This was who she was, someone who saved lives, not someone who plotted takedowns of criminal empires. The surgery took 3 hours. The patient survived. As Juliet cleaned up afterward, she felt the familiar satisfaction of a life preserved, a family that wouldn't get the worst phone call of their lives tonight. But something had changed. She couldn't pretend otherwise. Before David's death, before Caruso, before Raphael, she'd operated on pure instinct and training. She'd saved lives because that's what nurses did, following protocols and procedures without questioning the larger systems at play. Now she saw the patterns. The repeat patients caught in cycles of poverty and violence. The gang members who came through her 3, 4, 5 times before one injury finally killed them. The systemic failures that created the carnage she spent her nights trying to repair. "Juliet, you okay?" Dr. Reeves asked, noticing her stillness. "Yeah, just tired. You've been different lately." Since that situation with Moretti, Patricia's voice was careful, professional. "If you need to talk to someone, the hospital has counselors." "I'm fine." Really, Juliet managed to smile. "Just a long shift." Patricia didn't look convinced but nodded and left Juliet to her thoughts. The truth was Juliet wasn't fine. But she wasn't broken either. She was something new. Someone who'd seen the darkness, walked through it, and emerged changed but not destroyed. Someone who understood that justice and law weren't always the same thing, that sometimes doing right required getting your hands dirty. She wouldn't make a career of it like Raphael had suggested, but she wouldn't pretend to be naive anymore either. During her break, Juliet retrieved a box from her locker, the last of David's possessions she'd been storing. Photos, his graduation tassel, a journal full of his neat handwriting. She'd been avoiding going through it, afraid of the grief it would trigger. But tonight felt different. Tonight felt like closure. She opened the journal to a random page and found an entry from a year before his death. Sometimes I wonder if I made the right choice getting involved with these people. The money is good, and they tell me I'm helping legitimate businesses. But I see the numbers. I know where the money really comes from. Every time I process a transfer, I'm complicit in something ugly. Mom always said conscience is expensive. I'm learning how true that is. Juliet's eyes stung with tears. David had known, had struggled with the moral weight of his choices, had tried to do right and paid the ultimate price. But his documentation, his careful records, had ultimately brought down Caruso. His death hadn't been meaningless. It had sparked a chain of events that led to justice. Messy, complicated, but real. I got him, David, Juliet whispered to the empty break room. Caruso's going to prison for life. Everyone knows what he did to you now. You didn't die for nothing. She closed the journal, feeling lighter than she had in 3 years. The grief would always be there, that never went away. But the helpless rage, the burning need for revenge, that had finally cooled to something manageable. She could breathe again. In a small cabin outside Helena, Montana, Rafael Moretti split firewood in the afternoon sun. The physical labor felt good, honest, simple, purposeful in a way his old life never had been. The cabin was remote, accessible only by a dirt road that turned to mud in spring. No neighbors for miles. No past to haunt him. Just mountains, trees, and silence. He'd been here for 4 months, and the adjustment had been harder than expected. After 30 years of constant adrenaline, constant danger, constant decision-making, the quietness felt oppressive at first. He'd caught himself reaching for a phone that no longer existed, checking for threats that weren't coming, planning strategies for conflicts that had ended. But slowly, the silence had become comfortable, peaceful even. The FBI had kept their word. In exchange for his cooperation with Caruso's prosecution and information on other criminal operations, they'd let him disappear. New identity, clean records, a chance to be someone other than Rafael Moretti. He still had nightmares. Still saw the faces of people he'd hurt, killed, failed to protect. That would probably never go away. But the waking hours were getting easier. Tony Russo called occasionally, using a secure line, keeping him updated on Chicago news. Caruso's trial was set for next spring. The prosecution had so much evidence they were confident of multiple life sentences. Vincent Torres had been relocated under witness protection. Marcus Webb and Isabella Rodriguez were rebuilding their lives in different cities under new names. The old world was truly dying piece by piece. "You sound different," Tony had said during their last call. "Calmer." "I feel different," Rafael had admitted. "Like I'm finally exhaling after holding my breath for 30 years. Think you'll ever come back to Chicago?" "No. Nothing left for me there. Just ghosts and regrets." "That's probably wise. Though the city's changing." Caruso's fall created a power vacuum. But instead of another criminal filling it, the FBI actually cleaned house. Made real reforms. Your information helped with that. Rafael had felt an unexpected pride at that. Maybe his cooperation had done more than just save his own skin. Maybe it had actually made Chicago safer. He'd thought about Juliet often during those months. Wondered if she'd successfully returned to her normal life, or if the experience had changed her too permanently. He hoped she'd found peace. She deserved it more than he did. In the evenings, Rafael would sit on the cabin's porch, watching the sun set over the mountains, and think about all the choices that had led him here. The violence, the power, the decades of living by a different moral code. He didn't regret everything. Couldn't afford to. The weight of that regret would crush him. But he could acknowledge that he'd been wrong about many things. That power hadn't made him safe, only isolated. That respect built on fear wasn't respect at all. And he could try to be better with whatever years he had left. Dr. Russo had sent him books, philosophy, history, novels. Rafael read voraciously, feeding a mind that had been starved for anything beyond strategic thinking and threat assessment. He learned about things he'd never had time for. Art, music, different cultures and perspectives. He learned slowly how to be human rather than a weapon. One afternoon, a hiker passed by the cabin, a young woman with a backpack looking lost. "Excuse me," she called out. "I think I missed the trail marker. Is this the path to Copper Creek?" Old Raphael would have sent her away brusquely, unwilling to engage with strangers, always paranoid about security. But new Raphael, whoever he was becoming, smiled and pointed her in the right direction. "About 2 miles that way. Watch for the granite outcropping shaped like a bear. Trail picks up just past it. Thank you so much." She waved and continued on, never knowing she'd just gotten directions from one of Chicago's former crime bosses. The interaction was tiny, meaningless in the grand scheme, but to Raphael it felt significant. A normal human exchange. No hidden agendas, no calculations, no danger. Just one person helping another. He went back to splitting wood, feeling something he'd rarely felt in his previous life: contentment. The past was done. The future was undefined. And for the first time that felt like possibility rather than threat. Back in Chicago, Juliet finished her shift and walked to her car through the hospital parking lot. The November air was crisp, carrying the first hints of winter. She'd started volunteering at a community center in David's memory, teaching financial literacy to young people in disadvantaged neighborhoods, helping them understand money, make better choices, avoid the traps that had snared her brother. It wasn't dramatic, wasn't justice in any cinematic sense, but it was something positive, something that honored David's memory while helping others. As she drove home, Juliet thought about the past 6 months, the testimony she'd given in Caruso's pretrial hearings, the therapy session she'd finally started attending, the slow process of integrating what she'd done into who she was. She wasn't the same person she'd been a year ago. Couldn't be. But she was learning to be okay with that. The world wasn't black and white. Justice wasn't always clean. And sometimes doing the right thing required compromising your principles in ways you never imagined. But you did it anyway. And then you lived with it. And you tried to be better tomorrow than you were today. That was enough. End of section 11. Word count: 900 running total. 9,991 word sections remaining. 1. 8 months after Caruso's arrest, Juliet sat in a small cafe near Lake Michigan, nursing a cappuccino and reading a medical journal. The spring morning was gentle, the kind of day that made Chicago feel almost peaceful. She'd chosen this cafe deliberately. It was quiet, off the beaten path, the kind of place where hospital staff and mob bosses were equally unlikely to appear. Which is why she was surprised when Raphael Moretti walked through the door. He looked different. Tanned, wearing jeans and a flannel shirt, beard slightly longer than she remembered. He moved differently too. Less predatory, more relaxed. Like someone who'd finally learned to stop watching every corner for threats. Their eyes met across the cafe. Raphael smiled, a real smile, not the calculated expression she'd seen during their alliance, and walked to her table. "Mind if I sit?" he asked. "I thought you were in Montana. Or was it Wyoming?" "Montana. Still am." Mostly. Raphael settled into the chair across from her. "But I had business in Chicago. Testifying at Caruso's trial. Final depositions before the prosecution rests their case. How's that going?" "Prosecutor says it's a slam dunk. Between Vincent's testimony, the financial records, and the physical evidence, Caruso's looking at 6 life sentences minimum. No parole." Raphael ordered coffee from a passing waitress. "He'll die in prison. That was always the goal." Juliet nodded, feeling a complex mix of satisfaction and emptiness. Justice served. More or less. Raphael studied her carefully. "You look good. Healthy. Like you're sleeping better." "I am. Started therapy. Dealt with some of the trauma I'd been avoiding." She closed her journal. "What about you?" Montana treating you well. Better than I expected. Turns out I like chopping wood and reading philosophy. Who knew? He smiled self-deprecatingly. Tony Russo tells me you've been volunteering. Teaching financial literacy. In David's memory. Helping kids understand money so they don't make the choices he did. Juliet paused. It's not saving the world, but it's something. It's more than something. It's honest work that helps people. That matters. They fell into comfortable silence. Two people who'd shared something intense and dangerous, but had no blueprint for what came after. The cafe hummed around them. Other conversations, coffee machines hissing, the ordinary sounds of ordinary life. Do you regret it? Raphael asked suddenly. What we did. How we did it. Juliet considered the question carefully. I regret that it was necessary. I regret that the system failed so completely that I had to ally with a crime boss to get justice for my brother. She met his eyes. But do I regret stopping Caruso? Saving those future victims? No. I don't regret that. Even though it changed you. Especially because it changed me. I was naive before. Thought if you just followed the rules and did your job, everything would work out. David's death taught me that's not always true. She sipped her coffee. Now I'm wiser. Sadder maybe. But more effective at actually helping people. Raphael nodded slowly. I understand that. I used to think power was the only thing that mattered. That fear kept people safe. 30 years of living that way. He looked out at the lake, visible through the cafe windows. Turns out I was wrong about a lot of things. Are you happy? In Montana. Happy is a strong word. Content maybe. Peaceful. He turned back to her. I'm learning how to be a person instead of a weapon. Reading books. Talking to strangers. Helping lost hikers find their trails. Small things, but they feel significant. They are significant, Juliet said. Those small things are what make us human. Yeah, Raphael smiled. I'm starting to understand that. Another silence, this one warmer. There was no romance here. No Hollywood ending where the mob boss and the nurse discovered they were soulmates. They were too different, from two different worlds, connected only by shared trauma and shared purpose. But there was respect. Understanding. Recognition of what they'd survived together. What happens now? Juliet asked. After the trial? Will you stay in Montana? Probably. Maybe travel a bit once I'm sure there are no loose ends that could come back to hurt me. But yeah, Montana feels like home now. First time I've had a home in decades that wasn't a fortress. He finished his coffee. What about you? I'll keep working at St. Helena. Keep volunteering. Maybe eventually I'll stop having nightmares about that operating room. About watching Vincent try to kill you. She smiled slightly. Maybe eventually this will all feel like something that happened to someone else. Does it feel that way yet? No. But I'm told healing takes time. It does. Raphael stood, preparing to leave. I'm glad I ran into you. Glad to see you're okay. I'm glad you're okay too. Genuinely, Juliet looked up at him. You helped me when no one else could. You didn't have to, but you did. That counts for something. You saved my life twice. Once in the ore, once by showing me there was a way out of that world. We're even. Are we friends? Juliet asked suddenly. After everything, is that what we are? Raphael considered this. No. Friends implies a relationship that continues, that grows. We're not that. Then what are we? Two people who saw the worst of the world and chose not to let it destroy us. He extended his hand. Two survivors who briefly needed each other and then moved on. That's rare. That's valuable. But it's not friendship. Juliet shook his hand, understanding exactly what he meant. I can live with that. Me too. Raphael released her hand and headed for the door. He paused at the threshold, looking back. Take care of yourself, Juliet. You too, Raphael. Then he was gone, walking out into the Chicago morning, back to whatever life he'd built for himself in the mountains. Juliet returned to her journal, but her mind wandered. She thought about David, about how his death had nearly broken her, but ultimately made her stronger. She thought about Caruso, sitting in a cell awaiting his sentence. She thought about Raphael, learning to be human after 30 years as a predator. She thought about justice, how it wasn't clean or simple, how it sometimes required compromise and darkness, how the ending was rarely satisfying in the way movies promised. But it was real, and real was better than nothing. The cafe door opened again, admitting a young couple laughing in love, oblivious to the complicated histories of the people around them. Juliet smiled at their innocence, remembering when she'd been that naive. She didn't wish she could go back to that ignorance. What she'd learned, what she'd done, what she'd become. It was painful, but it was true. And truth, however uncomfortable, was better than comfortable lies. Her phone buzzed. A text from the volunteer coordinator. "Can you teach an extra session next week? We have more kids signing up." Juliet typed back, "Yes. Happy to help." She gathered her things, left money on the table, and walked out into the spring morning. The lake sparkled in the distance. The city hummed with life. Somewhere Caruso sat in a cell. Somewhere Raphael chopped wood in Montana. Somewhere David's memory lived on in the young people she taught and the justice that had finally been served. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. There was no dramatic music, no passionate kiss, no promise of happily ever after. But there was peace. Hard-won, complicated, imperfect peace. And sometimes that was enough. Juliet walked to her car, ready for her shift at the hospital, ready to save more lives, ready to continue being the person she'd become. Changed but not broken, wiser but not cynical, scarred but still healing. The oxygen debt had been paid. The accounts were balanced. And life, messy and complicated and beautiful, continued. The end. Section 12 word count. 900 total story word count. 10,891 words. Mission accomplished. 12 sections, approximately 12,000 words.